Okay. Finally, something fun to read. Uh, Welcome back. I'm Hawk. I'm your host for whatever this is. I wanted to call these little videos Brain Farts with Hawk, and my brother was like, "No, I really don't think we should do that." So, we're trying to come up with something a little bit more, professional, but I like that name. But, you know, I'm the gas pedal, he's the brakes. So I'm recording this on Monday, April 28th. There was a hearing today in one of the law firm executive order cases. Remember that Donald Trump has issued a whole bunch of executive orders against law firms who had formerly employed people that he doesn't like. All of the law firms that he has targeted no longer employ those people who he doesn't like and no longer represent people who he doesn't like. But he's issuing executive orders against them anyway, putting all kinds of restrictions on them, yada, yada, yada. A bunch of the law firms, including some really, really, really respected litigation law firms, have just capitulated and gone along with Trump and struck deals with him and, agreed to provide billions of dollars worth of pro bono legal services to him and his favorite causes, I guess. Whatever. But several have said, no, I'm not going to do this. And at least four law firms have sued the Trump organization. All four of those law firms, at this point, at this stage of the litigation, all four of those law firms have gotten temporary restraining orders issued against the Trump administration, preventing the Trump administration from administering those blatantly unconstitutional executive orders. There was a hearing today in one of those cases involving a law firm named Jenner and Block, and they sought to. They're having further hearings because they want to make the temporary restraining order against Trump's executive order. They want to make that temporary restraining order permanent. And so that's what today's hearing was about in front of Judge John Bates in the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia. Judge Bates was appointed by George W. Bush. The judge during this hearing became really exasperated with the attorney who was there on behalf of the government from the Department of Justice. So, appearing for the law firm Jenner and Block was an attorney named Michael Atanzio, and representing the DOJ and the Trump organization was a guy named Richard Lawson. And so we're just going to call him Dick. We have Mr. Atanzio and Dick. Dick had a bad day today. Oh, I'm trying to make myself laugh so I don't curl up in the corner. So, Trump issued a series of these executive orders, and they were targeted big name law firms that represented prominent Democrat clients like Hillary Clinton, or had refused to represent Trump or other pro MAGA causes, firms that had hired former federal prosecutors who investigated him or had worked on criminal cases that he was facing before he won re-election. The president's social media posts and executive orders often lambastes these firms using language accusing them of being dishonest and a dangerous risk to national security. The sanctions that he has sought to impose include stripping security clearances from the firm's attorneys and staff, which is critically important for certain types of work that these firms do in representing federal employees. And he has terminated contracts with the firms that they had with federal agencies. He has barred firms' employees from entering federal buildings. I mean, you can't bar an attorney from entering a federal courthouse. That's stupid. He has demanded that firms abolish their diversity, equity, and inclusion policies and programs, and he's threatened additional civil and criminal investigations against the firm. But a handful are digging in, and we had a hearing today in one of those cases. And both Democrat and Republican appointed judges have ruled against the Trump administration on all of these executive orders for the firms that have fought them, finding the executive orders to be likely unconstitutional. Monday's hearing was to hear oral arguments for Jenner and Block to make their temporary restraining order permanent. Mr. Atanzio, representing the law firm, repeated defensive blows against Trump's executive order on constitutional grounds: First Amendment rights of free speech and freedom of association, Fifth Amendment rights for due process, and the Sixth Amendment right of firms' clients to obtain the legal representation of their choice. Defenses that Judge Bates signaled he found persuasive. Atanzio also cited the chilling effect of the law firms that caved to Trump's demands and multiple examples of how his executive order was targeting Jenner and Block for its protected speech rights. Judge Bates seemed poised to issue a more sweeping ruling, striking down the executive order in its entirety than recent courts have that have taken up similar executive orders. Atanzio began the hearing by arguing that the DOJ had offered nothing in its pleadings to rebut the court's findings from the temporary injunction that had already issued, that the executive order was unconstitutional, and that the constitutional violations were now even more clear than they were before. Quote, "The threat to the legal profession, the threat to Jenner, has only escalated," Atanzio said, because Trump's actions were incentivizing firms to accommodate their views to the administration's over their own advocacy for their clients or face the music of a punishing executive order. So that argument is saying by threatening to issue these executive orders, these law firms are being put in a position of having to consider Donald Trump and potential executive orders ahead of the interests of their own clients who they are representing, who are paying the law firm to represent them. And you can't have that. You just can't have that. Mr. Atanzio spoke on the harm of settlements by the Trump, the firms that have caved. The harm that's flowing from this is that it's incentivizing and reaffirming the construct in which executive branch says, accommodate us or face the music. He also discussed Trump's executive order and pressure on firms to change what they do. What do law firms do? They advocate for clients, and the message becomes look over your shoulder about what arguments you're making, or you're stuck with an executive order as punishment. The judge was receptive to these arguments, and the arguments then shifted to focus on the president's power to control security clearances, which, you know, the lines between the separation of the branches, the separation of powers, is going to get muddy here, because the president does have that power to decide who does and does not get security clearances. And the judge acknowledged that this is an area where Trump has broad latitude. But Atanzio replied that the president's actions were so transparently retaliatory that the judge did have power to impose limits. Atanzio described Trump's justification for yanking Jenner and Block security clearances. Quote, "This is a bad law firm because of its speech. This is a bad law firm because it once employed a critic of the president. This is a process that the court can review. This cannot be a constitution-free zone." And Atanzio pointed out that more than 2,000 individual law firms, or 2,000 individuals, individuals, law firms, and organizations had filed amicus briefs in defense of his client, a breathtaking left-right conservative progressive constellation of supporters who agreed that Trump's executive orders undermine what it means to be an attorney. Judge Bates grilled the DOJ attorney. His name's Dick. Judge Bates grilled Dick on the language of the executive order that was the president's justification for revoking the law firm's security clearances based on the national interest, quote unquote, and not national security. The DOJ lawyer didn't have an answer for the judge, and the judge appeared to be incredulous that Dick didn't have an answer. When Dick tried arguing that Trump's decisions on security clearances were unreviewable, Judge Bates posed a hypothetical. Could the president deny security clearances to all Muslims or all Democrats? And Dick conceded that no, he probably wouldn't be able to do that. That would be reviewable by the court. And then Judge Bates said, so why is a blanket law, why would a blanket executive order affecting a single law firm not be reviewable? Dick didn't have an answer. Judge Bates had to raise his voice incredulously multiple times in response to Dick's arguments, multiple times making repeated, indignant, and scorching remarks, demanding Dick answer if Jenner and Block were still entitled to due process. Judge Bates became audibly frustrated when Dick tried to defend restricting Jenner and Block employees from entering federal government buildings on the grounds of opposing discrimination. To which Judge Bates said, "Give me a break." When the judge is talking to you like that, you're losing, Dick. Dick had a bad day today. Atanzio then gave his rebuttal, and he closed out by arguing the DOJ's argument is like a game of twister verbal gymnastics to justify this architecture in retaliation based only on speech. All we have to do is read this thing. It reeks of unconstitutionality. It should be set aside entirely. It was set up to be a whole, to be one form of punishment, and it should be taken down in the same way. And he argued that firms like Paul Weiss got relief from the entirety of executive order against them by bending the knee. And he concluded by saying that Jenner and Block should likewise get total relief under the Constitution. Judge Bates wrapped up the hearing without issuing a ruling, telling the parties he would take some time to consider it and write an opinion. And regardless of what happens, it's going to be appealed. And Judge Bates knows that. He knows that this is going to be appealed, and eventually it's going to be appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. So Judge Bates is going to write a very thorough, very well-reasoned, and very hard to overturn opinion, absolutely trashing this executive order against this law firm issued by Donald Trump. So we will keep an eye on this case. Thanks for watching. I'm Hawk. If you enjoyed this video, please click like, leave a comment, and subscribe to my page. It's free, and I'll see you soon. I hope you guys enjoyed this one.